Hi people, welcome to part 5 of my video series on discovering novel strategies to defeat COVID-19 through knowledge graphs. In part A of this video series, I gave you an introduction as to how knowledge graphs are very useful in fighting COVID-19. In part B, we discussed the existing knowledge graphs and the limitations thereof. In part C, I discussed the challenges of creating a universal COVID-19 knowledge graph. In part D, the focus was on creating knowledge graphs through manually curated data. And finally, in part E, I'm going to discuss how you all, each one of you, can contribute to this initiative. As you know, the first and foremost requirement to be able to create a knowledge graph is to get data. And as I discussed earlier, getting the accurate set of triplets, source, relation, target triplets from the research papers using scripts is very difficult. There are ways by which you can get more accurate data by choosing a better script, by writing a better script. But again, as I discussed in one of my previous videos, the accuracy which you get is way beyond expectation, is way below the expectation. And so I decided, because of constraints of time, because of the complexity of the problem, I decided that we should rather go for manual data curation, for which I need your help. So the set of research papers which we will be considering for manual curation is the one which is available at WHO website. It is the one which is known as WHO COVID database. So this is the COVID WHO database. If you were to Google WHO COVID research papers, you would be directed to this link in which they'll point you to the COVID-19 database, which essentially points to the link which opened here. So this COVID-19 database is a repository of more than 50,000 articles. These articles are in different languages. Most of them are in English. So it seemed the top ones, the first 5 articles were in Chinese. However, most of them are in English, and if there are people who know Chinese or who know any of the other languages, they can as well help. But you need not fear. Most of them are in English, and it will be easy to contribute. It so happened that today the top 5 listed, top 5 or 6 listed are those in Chinese language. Uh, the idea is to look at the research papers from this COVID-19 database of WHO, which has more than 50,000 of them. And I would like to emphasize on the fact that this data set has research papers from multiple journals. If you go back to the website, you will see that this has research papers from Medline. This is research papers from Elsevier. When you go to these research papers, you also find research papers published in different journals, as in Springer.com and so on. So this is a kind of repository of research published in different journals, and this is one of the most important reasons why I'm preferring this database vis-a-vis any other specific publication. So the idea behind this part 5 was to illustrate how you can contribute to the curation of this data set. And here I'll discuss the entire process end to end as to how this can be done. To be able to contribute to this initiative, the first requirement is to choose one research paper from this WHO COVID-19 database. You can choose any research paper of your choice. For example, say I choose this research paper. This is kind of latest, and this is less generic than these two. This is kind of more biologically oriented. I'll open this. I'll go to the full text of it to actually see the article. Yes, this is the article. Pretty long. I'll just illustrate how you can curate a small part of it, so the rest, whosoever is focusing on this article can do it by themselves. So after choosing your article, you got to check whether somebody else is not working on the same article. For that, you can go to this link in which everyone who is expected to work, who is working on an article, are expected to add the relevant details. For example, because I started illustrating this, I'll just mention for the time being my name here, the COVID WHO ID, which is when you go to any research paper, you have an ID here, the COVID WHO ID that you will take up. This kind of uniquely identifies every research paper. You have these IDs specified here as well. I'll go and mention this ID, and then did I not copy it well? 66144. You have this, and then you have the paper title, which is I can take from here. Let me first get it in raw format. And then I edit here. This is the second step. So if somebody else is already working on an article, you can see whether the article that is of your choice has been worked on by somebody by searching for the COVID WHO ID or searching for the title. You could easily identify it from the ID also. The reason is I decided to add the title was because you find it more intuitive sometimes. So you might just like to search for certain keywords. However, searching for the ID is sufficient. So you will update your own choice along with your name in the sheet. After that, you will open a Google Sheet in which you will add source relation target pairs, which I'll be discussing shortly as to what the entire process is. How do you extract the source relation target papers, target triplets that will be discussed in the next few slides. And when you are done with your sheet, you will submit your file at this COVID-19 knowledge graph corpus. You'll have extracted a CSV sheet, which you will then upload here. And you can also see all the submissions, including yours, that have been done so far by clicking on this link. This will give, so all three files which were done by me, as illustrated in the last video, are shown here. So, what are the detailed steps of curating a research paper in the format required? For this, first of all, you will go to Google Sheets, you will create a new spreadsheet, and you will title that spreadsheet with the COVID WHO ID, and you will create 3 column headers: source, relation, and target. Let me illustrate the process. You'll go to Google Sheets, you will add the new spreadsheet. Suppose we are focusing on this paper, which is uh, this. So you will title it as W COVID. You will title it as COVID WHO this, and then you will create 3 columns: source, relation, and target. After that, the first row which you will be adding will be COVID WHO ID, the one which you have here above. you would add this term, COVID WHO research paper title, and then you will add the paper title. Now you may ask, why do I need to add it separately once I already have it here? Well, that's fine. But to maintain consistency in the sheet, it's helpful to have all the three columns populated on non-rows. And for this, it will be easier if you add the column from your end as well. The target for this is your research paper name that you chose earlier. Good. Now comes the main data that is to be populated. So once you will populate the main data and once you will be finishing this sheet, you will be able to download. You can export it as a CSV, you can download it as a CSV. In the CSV, you can then go and export. You can go and then upload on the relevant link. So let me discuss further steps on some generic instructions on how we should go about extracting these triplets. So basically what you have are sentences out there from which you have to extract the subject object relationships. You have to extract what is the source, you have to extract what is the target, you have to extract what is the relationship between the source and the target. And the approach which we are following here is both the source and the target should be nouns or noun clauses. So you'll have something like, say, hydrochloroquine was tested in trials. So you'll have hydrochloroquine and you'll have trials, and then you may have a relationship tested. You can't simply have something which is not a noun phrase. So you can't have something like, to be the first drug to be tested in trials as a subject or as the object. You got to change it. So you got to, if you have a statement like, to be the first drug to be tested in trials extensively was a major achievement, or some other sentence, and rather than saying to be the first drug to be tested in trials, you would say such and such drug was tested first in trials. So such and such drug, whatever the name of the drug, that will be the source. Tested would be the relationship, and first in trials, that would be your target. Or you could as well say tested first as part of your relationship, and then you could specify the trials in which it was tested, where the trial occurred. So the idea is to make it more noun or noun clause centric. The second thing is, you may have chain relationships. For example, A causes B and B causes C. So in these cases, it is important that you have first the relationship between A and B described, and then the relationship between B and C described. You could have a sentence like, X is responsible for Y, which is responsible for Z. Then in your subject column, source column, you'll have X. In target column, you'll have Y. But in the next source column, you'll have Y. And in the target column, you'll have the third entity, Z. A standard which we want to follow across this entire documentation is, curation is, that we will only keep the first letter of every entity capital, except if the entity is a proper noun where all the letters, all the relevant letters will be capitalized. Another important thing to note is that in this curated data set, there may be situations where you will feel you will not be able to describe the entire information by just adding a few words in the noun phrase. You may have to add the entire sentence, and that is fine. So there are cases where you may require to include all conditions in your statement, which are an integral part of the of your statement. and you'll include those conditions. But at the same time, what you'll also do is, after including the sentence, suppose the question is, the source is uh, a drug, remdesivir, and you have to the relationship is that you have to describe the performance in a given trial, and then you'll take one sentence to describe the performance. It was observed that it worked effectively for 50% of people, but not so for not so effectively for another 40% and so on. Well, this is a case where you could still actually cut the sentence into different parts, work effectively for 50% people and not so for others. But in different, you could put it in different lines. But there will be sentences which will be more complex, and those are the ones which I illustrated in my previous uh, videos also. If I go back to those sentences, for example, let me open my Google Sheets where you have all those durations. Sample curations. So, oh, this was something which I just opened for your reference. I'll open the previous other ones. What has happened here? It's easier to see from here in a spreadsheet. So, for example, in this data set, I happen to include a sentence that for glucocorticoids, the recommendation of usage, the usage recommendation is that CDC recommended against the use of systematic glucocorticoids in patients with COVID-19 unless there are other indications such as asthma or chronic obstructive lung disease exacerbation, refractory septic shock, and adrenal insufficiency. So that is something which you actually find it relatively difficult to split in multiple sentences because these are conditions involved here. So what I did was I just kept it as a full sentence, but then the next important thing is while you keep it as a full sentence, the second step is you will take that full sentence again as a source, and then you will take the relevant entities, the relevant new entities, like you have refractory septic shock here and adrenal insufficiency, and you will just use a relationship link to refer to these entities. Uh, this relationship is between the sentence and the important terms which come inside it. So that because these entities will be possibly nodes, will be possibly important nodes which will have their own nodes linked to them. So in case long phrases or full sentences are added as part of the source or target, and they have known general terms which may themselves be a possible node of the graph, one or more multiple relations linked to should be added, where the object should be each of those terms, one for each relationship. So, and I'm talking about non-general terms. So it's not like you have. So CDC is something that already comes before. It comes in as part of a previous sentence, so I did not decide to add it back. However, you will not just add patients, for example. Patients is a generic thing. So you will add things which are new. You will add chronic obstruction. I'm not adding a similar that may have been added as part of previous uh, document. So let me illustrate this in detail by choosing a research paper. The one which we were trying to focus on was this. You had this paper on single cell sequencing of peripheral blood mononuclear cells reveals distinct immune response landscapes of COVID-19 influenza patients. And I'll not start from the summary because summary is kind of not so helpful to start with. What I find generally is they just as because it is summary, they just list their main observations, and those main observations actually have a lot of hidden context to it, and it is best that you first curate the main part of the research paper and then you go to the summary if required, if it is non-repetitive. So let me start from here, which is this. So if you see the sentence, coronavirus disease 2019, COVID-19, which rapidly spread globally and has been proclaimed as a severe public health emergency of international concern, PHIEC, by the World Health Organization. Uh, and then you have by June 30th, 2020, more than these many cases, and so on and so forth. You have a sentence in which you have information which is useful. Some of it is generic, may have come in other research papers also. However, I'm putting it once again because those will be filtered nevertheless in the code. So you see that rather this should be taken first because as I discussed earlier, the relationships which I have are full form relationships. So to maintain a standard, I describe a relationship as a full form relationship in these cases, not as a relationship of abbreviation. So I choose the short form first, and then I go to the full form. And the full form for this is this. So this is not uh, well. This is a full form in this case because you have COVID. Fine, fine. And I always read the two words together, coronavirus. So I simply thought it was CD. No. So this COVID-19 was obviously known to me, but how CO stood for corona and V stood for VI stood for virus wasn't so intuitive. Sometimes you miss out very simple things. The next line which we shall be considering, let me close the other tabs because otherwise I'll keep on wasting time by uselessly navigating there. This we have already seen. This we have seen. This I'm working on. Task sharing is already added. That is updated. The next, let me close these also. Well, this is generic. I did not say it spread globally, but I need to say that COVID-19 has been declared as a public health emergency of international concern. And to this, I'll just add relation status, and the status is that it is declared as a severe public health emergency of international concern. Public health emergency of international concern. So PHIEC, or better you take this. And then you describe what is a PHIAC again by using the full form thing. This is your public health emergency of international concern. You do not need to add about WHO, and as you might guess, WHO would be constantly being referred to. Or let's say you can add it here because it will be filtered anyway. So you can add WHO full form. This. Now, the next line is more of statistics, which will change from day to day and from one region to another. Even within the same region, they'll change, of course, for time. This is not something which I consider as really important for mentioning in the curated data set. This will not be useful. You have the next line, which is quite useful. This is actually the main part of the paper. So you have common respiratory viruses include this. So what you can see, you can just have a subject like common respiratory viruses, and do that, uh, because these are examples, you could just write the relationship as example, and you could include the viruses which are being referred to here. So this is COV, and then again you'll have to copy it, because actually uh, these have to be different nodes. It will not be helpful if you were to include them as part of a single node, because with each of these virus there will be other relationships. So I'll just add two of them. You can add others, whoever is doing it. I'll just take one more. Maybe I'll take the parainfluenza virus. So you have the next line. COV belongs to the virus family Coronaviridae, which is an enveloped non-segmented single-stranded positive sense RNA virus. So you will mention the family of COV, and then you'll also mention the attributes. Now, if you read this, that COV belongs to the virus family, which is an enveloped non-segmented single-stranded positive RNA. This positive sense RNA virus. Initially, I was confused whether it is referring to the COV here or whether it is referring to this family. However, uh, for this sentence to be accurate, if this was referring to the family, it should have something like which is a family of, which it isn't, or it should have something like a family Coronaviridae, which are enveloped non-segmented single-stranded viruses, etc. So you don't have that, so it means it refers to COV only, and you will write describe these as the feature of COV, and the feature is again I'll take some simple features, that this is enveloped, and you can write add other features, that this is segmented. Again, I'll just set two of them. Non-segmented, sorry, I said opposite of it, and so on. And then you have the third line. SARS-CoV-2 is a beta coronavirus, like Middle East respiratory coronavirus and severe acute respiratory syndrome coronavirus, all of which are suggested to have originated in bats. So then you see this is a very helpful line, because this gives you more than one thing. This tells you that SARS-CoV is which category of virus. So this is a beta category. Coronaviruses are classified in different categories: alpha coronavirus, beta coronavirus, gamma coronavirus, and you have this is a beta coronavirus, and you'll populate it here. Similarly, you'll have other details on. You'll This is also referring to the MERS-CoV virus and the SARS-CoV virus, which you'll then mention there. As the same thing. And then you'll have the same thing mentioned for SARS-CoV, which was the SARS virus. But it is also important that all of they mentioned that all of which are suggested to have originated in bats. So for each of these, you can add 3 rows. So there will be 3 rows for them in total that you can add, and you can just mention that as possible origin bats, because they are suggested. You can write suggested origin because that's the more appropriate word, more appropriate phrase. And then you have another sentence: evidence supports that the cellular receptor angiotensin converting enzyme and the serine protease, these are key mediators for this entry. Again, you can add something like ECE2 with its full form and TMPRSS2 with its full form as role, the key mediator for SARS-CoV-2 post-cell entry. And let me check for a line which is, well, I'll have to add a full sentence. It has been shown that EC2 is expressed not only in the respiratory system but in a range of organ tissues, thus indicating viral infection can rapidly spread to the disease to the body as the disease progresses. Well, you can still split it into multiple conditions, multiple lines. You may have a line where you just have one sentence, which it will be difficult to split into multiple sentences because they are conditions. For example, here also you have conditions. Uh, Let me check this. Well, these are simple cases. Well, just for example, may not be the best case, but I'll take up this case because of constraints of time rather than going through the whole document. You'll see it yourself. There will be sentences where it will, because they have a lot of conditional statements, they have a lot of clauses, so it will be uh, difficult to have those sentences easily spread up as part of different uh, subject-object relationships. So you can do that, but again, it won't be right because it is essential to capture all relationships in a single sentence. If I say were to have a sentence like, we report the transcriptome dynamics of peripheral blood mononuclear cells from patients with COVID-19, comparing those profiles to this. Suppose I were to take this. This is not a valid sentence to be taken because uh, you don't we may not actually write mentioning about what precisely they are reporting. If you do not want to show the results of the experiment or you do not want to show those details, you may as well want to. That will as well be helpful. But the more important point is, in case you have a sentence where you have to show the entire thing, what you will do is you will this sentence, for example, suppose it was uh, I'm deleting these two, they're kind of incomplete. You will add them later, of course. Suppose the sentence was added as an object of something. Or let me say, to make it better, that what they are describing, what they are reporting. And let me just say authors. This still makes sense. The more important thing which I want to show is that whenever you'll have sentences which you will actually add back as the target will be added back as source, you will have other statements, you'll have other relationships which will come from these sentences. For example, this talks about peripheral blood mononuclear cells. So we'll mention about these cells. You'll first mention the full form, which is PBMC, PBMC. Then you can write that the full form of is this, and you'll have, well, this is a simple relationship, so you'll have it referred here. Similarly, you can add another node to this. Remember, this source node was a target node of a previous relationship. You'll again have a link to relationship added, and then you can uh, pick something else, comparing these two profiles in IAV patients in control health and control healthy dominance. So you can talk about what is this IAV. So where is this IAV being referred to? IAV, influenza virus. So you will refer to IAV infected patients or IAV in particular, and then you will give the full form and so on. So this is the way in which you will, if you are focusing on one research paper, you will take all the sentences one by one and you will be curating those sentences. And this entire activity, because depending on the length of the research paper, may not take really a lot of your time. It may take maybe an hour or maybe an hour, 15 minutes, maybe 1.5 hours at max. However, given the large number of articles out there, and the fact that any single person may not be able to curate all those articles, your help is very much sought in this exercise. So you can take up a research article, you can curate it that way, then you can download it as a CSV, and finally you can upload it in the link which I shared earlier. So this was a link. You can upload that file here. That's not a complete file, so I'll not be uploading it here, but you can do it. There is another way. Suppose you don't want to spend 1 hour. I appreciate if you do so. That's really required. We are in a very, very, very dangerous situation, and we should try our best to be able to come to solutions to COVID-19 more quickly. But suppose for some reason, whatever, you don't have 1 hour, or suppose, say, you just want to spend 5 minutes on this. So there is a way out there as well. Rather than populating an entire sheet, you could just populate, say, 5 relationships, but rather than going through the steps where you take the document, see who is working on the document, who is not working, what you could do is you could simply take up a document and you could take this up from any journal, you could take it up from any news article. You can take any news article for it, and you can simply fill this form. This is a Google form in which you are required just to add 5 relationships, and all these are optional. So just fill your name, the title of the paper, the authors of the paper. In case you take WHO COVID article, you paste, you add the COVID ID, WHO COVID ID. Then the way we have discussed here, rather than adding all the relationships, you just add 5 relationships. So source one, relation one, target one, and so on for 5 relationships, and then you just submit. So here I'm not asking you to actually check whether somebody else is working on the same document or not. I'm just making it easier. So there will be people, if you can as well check it from the sheet mentioned. So if you feel that you are working on it, and it's important to let others know that you have already worked on it, you still go and mention on that page, on the task curation page. But I feel the challenge here is if you are doing 5 sentences and you say that this has already been done, it won't be really helpful. So maybe this will lead to some repetition, but given that it's kind of randomized, people may still not work on the same uh, paper. There is high probability that people may choose different papers which people like. So my preference would be that you actually curate an entire research paper. However, if you feel it like you don't have that much of time, you just want to spend 5 to 10 minutes, 5 minutes, you just go to this link, put in your answers, fill in the relevant fields, and submit. So, given the number of research papers is in thousands, tens of thousands, I really require tens of thousands volunteers for this. And I think if people are able to contribute to it, it won't take a long time to build this entire curated data set on which we will be able to build a knowledge graph. Once this curated data set is ready, and in parallel to that, uh, I'm focusing on designing an interface or website whereby users can search for graphs and extract relevant content based on the universal COVID-19 knowledge graph data. And as I discussed earlier, the website which I want would be similar to the COVID-19 Graph Explorer. So I've started focusing on that, and this is the basic kind of template which I have in my mind. Not something exactly so, but as something as far as interactivity is concerned, as I discussed in one of my previous videos. To see that. So I want to see all papers, see all patents corresponding to SARS. I want to see all papers corresponding to SARS, all genes corresponding to SARS, and so on. And this will show up here. Uh, so as I said, there are plenty of other initiatives on knowledge graphs, each with their own limitations. And what I'll do is, while I'll work on my own website, however, I'll also make this dataset public. Anyway, this is sourced from the public, so it is good making it public. I should make it public. And this dataset will be made available to scientists and researchers so that they can use it to their end. So somebody who may already have a web page of a different kind may use it to power their knowledge graph, which that web page displays. And this way we'll be able to make the most effective use of it. And as this web application is developed using Vue.js, Beautify, and Y-Files for HTML, and I'm not so conversant with them. I'm trying to learn them, but it will be helpful if somebody who already has knowledge of them can help me on it. So I request everybody, uh, I request you to see if you have any experience on any of these, you please do reach out to me. Your experience can help me a long way in designing this website faster. So finally, I am looking forward to support from everybody on dataset curation. People, this is a very, very serious situation. More than 30,000 deaths, 32,000 deaths, in fact, which have occurred in India. They could have been avoided if we had focused on finding solutions to COVID-19. This has been 6 months now. And you never know how serious it can become in the next few months. So why do wait for the worst to come? We should prepare for the worst. We should do our best. We should devote each and every second of ours in fighting COVID-19 in different ways. I mean, in enabling people to prevent exposure, to prevent getting infected, uh, in finding solutions to COVID-19 like this initiative. So that's very important. And at the end of the day, the game changer, the real thing, will be a vaccine, will be a drug, or it will be some other solution which will help us in defeating COVID-19 once and for all. And though protecting ourselves from COVID-19 is important, but at the same time, taking an offensive approach, killing the virus, is even more important. And so we have to focus on discovery of new sites and connecting scientific literature to discover new sites will be a fruitful way for that. Ultimately, if we are able to give our best, we will be able to contribute in significant measure to the fight against COVID-19. I thank you all for being a part of this video series. I request you all to actively contribute to this initiative. I sincerely need your help. Thank you.